Yes, good evening and welcome to another edition of Indaba, a program of the Emancipation Support Committee of Trinidad and Tobago, a place where knowledge grows, as we always say. I am Claudius Fergus, and my host at the top of the program, my co-host, is none other than our technical program expert, Renee Francois.
Hi, good
Good
night.
evening, Renee.
Good night. Good night,
Yes.
everyone.
So we are not on Talk City 91.1 FM this evening because of the Carnival commitments by the station. So it's a special welcome to our viewers and listeners on Facebook and YouTube Live. So we also have a simplified program this evening. The program is divided into two segments only. The first would be the Africa Report, and the second would be a feature discussion on Carnival. Of course, the main Carnival events would be just a few days away, Monday and Tuesday. But generally in Trinidad, as in some of the other islands and places around the Caribbean, Carnival is an extended event, sometimes extended into a whole month with panorama, children's carnival, children's panorama, calypso competitions, and so on. So the carnival has been ongoing, but the climax would be Monday and Tuesday. Okay, so everything is being affected by the carnival these days. And we have our senior co-host, because he was our main anchor for many years, going solo for many, many years. Shabaka Kambon, welcome, my brother, welcome.
Greetings, Dr. Fergus.
Yes, so we are going to have in the feature discussion, it's an interview. It was pre-recorded, and we are going to deal with that because, again, because of Carnival, our guests who would have been live have commitments tonight. The stick fighting final is also tonight. So it's a very busy week, and it's going to be a busy weekend as well. Yes, so as usual, before we dive into the Africa report, a few words of greetings from our co-host, Renee. Go ahead.
Hi, good night, everyone. Good night to all our listeners, Dr. Fergus, Shabaka. Just really excited to be a part of this program tonight. I had the privilege of doing the featured interview with Abeo Jackson and Keegan Taylor, who are cultural activists and artists in their own right. So I'm really excited to share that interview and that information they shared with us. For those of the listeners who are joining us here and are not at Skinner Park in San Fernando taking the the stick fighting finals, stay with us. You'll get some really good information and just cultural background behind the art form. And Dr. Fergus, I've expressed interest about the ongoing conflict in Congo and just kind of understanding the players involved and why they would have been involved in the first place. So I'm really excited to see. I know I tend to have the opportunity to listen to the Africa report before everybody else. But I usually leave it for when we play it live. So, I'm listening and taking in the information with everyone else at the same time. So yes.
Indeed, indeed, indeed. Brother Shabaka,
It's
you're
fun.
muted. Okay.
So we're here. Let's go.
Yes. Are you having any technical problems? Or you want us to go ahead? Shabaka? Okay,
Yeah.
so we will dive into the Africa report then, if you're having any challenges there. Yes, Shabaka?
No, man, Doc. I'm here with you guys. No challenges on
Okay,
my end.
great, great. Yes, so
Um,
as Renee would have hinted, the topic this evening for the Africa report is on the Democratic Republic of Congo, that's the DRC. There are two countries close to each other named Congo, so don't get confused. The larger one is the Democratic Republic of Congo, and then you have the Federal Republic of Congo, which is a smaller one. One, the DRC was colonized by Belgium, and the other was colonized by the French. So you have these two. We're looking at the DRC, the Democratic Republic of Congo. During the 90s, the name of that country had been changed to Zaire, and then it was renamed the Congo as well. Of course, Congo with the K is an ancient name, and the people are called Bakongo, the language Kikongo. So Congo is not a colonial name, it's just the spelling has been colonized from the K to the C. So we are going to look at the case that is ongoing there. Some people call it a crisis, and different terms, of course, but it's a situation that is spiraling out of control. We are going to do this report in two parts so that you can have a firm understanding of the current situation. So while I mention some aspects of the current situation, I look more at the background and the significance of Congo. And in part two, I would look more directly at what is happening today on ground. So over to Renee. We are looking at the case study for terror, imperialism, and the victims of the revolution.
To then President Yar'Adua asking permission to build a permanent U.S. military base in Nigeria. Yar'Adua said no. Within a few months, he died mysteriously. Till today, we still don't know what killed Yar'Adua. Within a few months, armed insurgency has started in Nigeria.
That was Nigerian investigative journalist in exile David Hundeyin, and this is the Africa Report on Indaba. Musa Yar'Adua succeeded Olusegun Obasanjo to the Nigerian presidency in 2009. Our topic in this edition of the Africa Report is the crisis in the DRC, the Democratic Republic of Congo. We begin with this clip to emphasize that the DRC is a part of a bigger African problem. The perpetual destabilization of mineral-rich regions of Africa is a staple feature of imperialist policy towards Africa. Recall the strategic assassinations of numerous African presidents because of their socialist policies, or simply because they were determined to break the chains of neo-colonial puppetry.
You heard from the Minister of DRC. What's wrong with your country? Well, we don't even start by saying the King of Belgium created a slave colony for 30 years. The government of Belgium ran the slave colony for another 40 years. The CIA assassinated your first popular leader, Mr. Lumumba.
That was economic professor Jeffrey Sachs. A true confession indeed, but it does not address the fullness of the problem. The murder of Congo's first president, Patrice Lumumba, was just the beginning of an undeclared insidious war against Africa to maintain the continent as the main economic feeding ground for the proverbial global north, after ostensibly granting independence. Among the many other victims of American and European secret agencies were Amilcar Cabral of Guinea-Bissau, Anwar Sadat of Egypt, Samora Machel of Mozambique, Thomas Sankara of Burkina Faso, Muammar Gaddafi, Libya, and 3 other presidents in the Congo Great Lakes region, Marien Ngouabe in the Republic of Congo in 1977, Melchior Ndadaye of Burundi in 1993, and Laurent Désiré Kabila of the DRC in 2001. Many others who escaped assassination were ousted from power. Recently, there has been an upsurge of media reports on the eastern region of the DRC. The region is home to similar ethnic and linguistic groups in today's Burundi, Rwanda, Uganda, northern Tanzania, and the eastern Congo. A simple map would show that this is one cultural region, but balkanized by European imperialists. What is happening in the DRC is not unique to the DRC. It is a microcosm of Africa's subjectivity to European predatory capitalism since the mid-19th century, and their key strategy of divide and dominate. From enslaved labor to palm oil, to natural rubber and copper, to gold and diamonds, to rare earths. Rare earths are the key ingredients in the development of artificial intelligence or smart technology, what is commonly called the Fifth Industrial Revolution, and Congo has an abundance of these rare earths. Incidentally, Africa was also critical to the emergence of the First Industrial Revolution of the 18th century and all subsequent phases in the evolution of mechanical production. The Congo Basin was the single largest contributor of forced labor on the plantations in the Americas that generated the wealth that fueled the First Industrial Revolution. Therefore, Congo is a never-ending tragedy of predatory capitalism. But even that is not the entire story. Before colonialism, there was no genocidal clashes between or among the different socio-economic groups that occupy the Great Lakes region. King Leopold of Belgium's atrocities in the Congo is well known. Leopold seized the Congo Basin in the 1880s and inflicted the most savage tyranny upon the native peoples in order to secure mainly rubber and copper. Men, women, and children were routinely flogged, hanged, and arms amputated, one of the many cases of genocide inflicted on colonial Africa, and probably the worst of them. Without Congo's copper, there would have been no mass production of electrical wires, including telegraph wires, the medium of the world's first global communication networks. Without Congo's rubber, and to a lesser extent Liberia's, there could be no insulation for these electrical wires, and no pneumatic tubes needed for revolutionizing wheel transport. Africa's rubber and copper were the foundation of modernity, technologically speaking, and Congo had the largest natural supplies of them. To understand the situation in 2025, it is imperative to revisit the colonization of ethnicity in the Great Lakes region, mainly to ensure success of Europe's key strategy of divide and dominate. The European contrived Tutsi-Hutu ethnicity lies at the heart of the conflict in Congo, that is, from a local perspective. These are two identities created by European invaders. At the height of Europe's pseudo-scientific racist insanity from mid-19th century, the anthropologists fabricated a theory of racial hierarchy of native Africans. In the Great Lakes region, they embraced the traditional ruling class and called them Hamites, while they labeled the masses Negroes. The rulers were more associated with cattle herding, while the masses were more into agriculture. These anthropologists claim that the Hamites were immigrants from the Horn of Africa and had some ancient admixture of Caucasian genes, which made them naturally superior to Negroes, and thus better rulers and partners to European invaders. Ultimately, the Europeans labeled these so-called Hamites of this region the Tutsi, and labeled the masses the Hutu, thus creating a version of apartheid in the region. The Tutsis conveniently adopted this superiority myth because it favored them. These terminologies survived the colonial era. By the way, from Tutsi we get the plural form Watusi, a word well known to Trinbagonians of the 1970s. Listen to this excerpt from the Rwandan Basic Education Board's lesson in social studies to how insane and dangerous this arbitrary definition was, and still is. Quote, in 1935, the Belgian colonial administration introduced a national identity card based on ethnicity. The Banyarwanda, who possessed 10 or more cows, were registered as Batusi. You could see two people born from the same parents given identities mentioning different ethnic groups, one Tutsi and another Hutu. End of quote. This division is foundational to the rivalries that fuel the conflicts in eastern Congo today. Belgium protected their interests by maintaining Tutsi rulership right down to independence in 1962. The current armed conflict started in 1959 when Hutu nationalists rose up against the Belgian colonials and launched armed attacks against the Tutsi aristocracy, causing hundreds of thousands of Tutsis to flee to Uganda and Kenya. Among the refugees was the politically influential Tutsi parents of Paul Kagame, who was just 2 years old. He has been president of Rwanda since 2000. Belgium finally handed over political power in 1962, making the Hutu the new ruling class. The first president, Gregoire Kabinda, a Hutu, immediately abolished the Tutsi monarchy and Tutsi chiefdoms across the country. In 1979, Tutsi intellectuals in Kenya formed a political party which changed its name to the Rwandan Patriotic Front, the RPF, in 1987, when the bulk of them were resident in Uganda shortly after the entry of Yoweri Museveni to the presidency. The RPF launched an arm wing similar to the ANC's Umkhonto we Sizwe. Paul Kagame was a soldier in that army and also served as a minister under Museveni. Kagame was among the RFP forces that invaded Rwanda in 1990 to launch the first civil war. Within the first month of the invasion, Kagame became the leader of the RPF forces. After 3 years of fighting, a peace treaty was signed called the Arusha Accord, based on a power-sharing agreement. In this interregnum, Kagame served as Minister of Defense. Less than a year into the peace accord, the last Hutu president of Rwanda, Juvenal Habyarimana, a Hutu, along with Burundi president, Cyprien Ntaryamira, a Hutu also, both died when their aircraft was mysteriously shut down on preparing to land at Kigali airport in Rwanda. Suspecting it to be an assassination, Hutu nationalists unleashed a reign of terror against the Tutsi. This was Rwanda's most tragic moment in history, the Rwandan genocide. It is now known that France and Belgium were deeply complicit in this genocide. In response, Kagame recommenced the civil war, but becoming the most powerful man in Rwanda. The refugee situation was now reversed, with many Hutu fleeing into eastern DRC, then called Zaire. In 1996, Kagame sponsored the invasion of Congo by Tutsi rebels. The successful war saw the overthrow of Mobutu Sese Seko. Succeeding Mobutu was Laurent Désiré Kabila. When Kabila expelled the invading army in 1998, a Rwandan-Ugandan army invaded Congo, a war that would escalate to include multinational armies and mercenaries. This was Africa's first world war, so called by many. The Patriotic Front ultimately morphed into M23, the dreaded Tutsi rebel group which recently captured Goma, the main city in eastern DRC, and declared it would not halt until it reaches Kinshasa, the capital of the DRC. M23 is solidly backed by President Paul Kagame, who has vowed not to rest until the threat of the Hutus is completely eliminated.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Amu Kanampili from AFP. My question is about the March 23 movement in Eastern DRC.
Well, those who accuse us, I would ask them why they actually don't support M23 themselves, including AFP.
That's President Kagame fielding media questions. This policy has brought Kagame into conflict with some of Africa's most prominent leaders. Not for one moment should we think that Kagame is a lame duck puppet of the global north. For many decades, the minerals of eastern DRC have flowed into Rwanda, which has benefited more from them than the DRC. The economic stakes are high all round. The situation is ready-made for imperial vultures to swoop in and collect the lion's share of the wealth of the eastern DRC. We will look directly at the current situation in our next Africa report.
Yes, so there you have it, and I hope it has shed some light on the situation in not only the Congo, but the whole of East Africa, actually. And it can help to explain, of course, the details would be different, but the situation often similar in hotspots across Africa where you have an abundance of minerals in northern Nigeria, for example, where Boko Haram and other so-called Islamist terrorists are terrorizing the country. In Sudan, in Burkina Faso, in Niger, same story, same complicity of the capitalist North, the capitalist industrial north, the same complicity, divide and dominate, create terror, create divisions within the society, arm them. That's part of the business of the arms industry as well. Arm them and then collect the minerals for next to nothing. So over to my co-host for a comment on this before we move on.
Well, Doc, I don't think we can move on tonight. I think there's just too much in this piece here for us to just move on to the next subject. Starting with this whole question of the destabilization of these mineral-rich countries. When we were at university, we learned about the resource curse theory or the paradox of plenty. And, nowhere in that lesson do I recall imperialism being a factor. But there were a number of reasons given for resource-rich countries not being able to benefit from their resources. So that right there off the bat, I think that was a very interesting feature. The other thing I think that came out in your report tonight was the Tutsis and the Hutus. Is it that you are arguing, just for clarity first, that these two designations are colonial in their origins?
Well, the words may have been borrowed out of the Swahili, but actually the identification of the people as Tutsi and Hutu was a contrivance of the European anthropologists. That anthropology was one of the tools that Europeans used in order to gain what we can call today intelligence on African societies. So they were always going into these non-European places to so-called study the people, study them. They never studied themselves. And the subject of anthropology was always other people. But in places such as Africa that had not yet been colonized, it was a means of collecting information. So ethnography was a very important aspect of anthropological research and so on. So that was part of the reason. They identified those people because it was important to them to partner with one group in order that they can dominate the area. And the people they called Tutsi were traditional rulers of Buganda, Rwanda, and those ancient kingdoms. We call them Iron Age kingdoms. They were highly developed, centralized kingdoms. And therefore, there was a ruling class, as any kingdom anywhere, any part in the world. But the Europeans decided conveniently to label the ruling class as a special ethnic racial group. And that was the baseline of the problem.
And of course, that was in keeping with their notion of hierarchy.
Exactly.
They really genuinely believed that those who were in power, and of course taking that from themselves, were of a superior group to everyone else. So there was something.
Yes, indeed. They fabricated this thing since the 18th century, and then they weaponized it in order to, assist in the control of people that were of different races to them. Well, in the understanding of what race was in those days, up to the late, at least mid 20th century.
Yeah, and
to
what
some extent,
in your piece is that it transcended the ruling class. I mean, what you talked about what happened in DRC, where they seem to they created a very arbitrary distinction between those who had more cows and those who had less.
Indeed, because they had, because anthropology is a science, or at least use scientific methodologies, they had to have some kind of concrete way of deciding these people belong to this group because of, objective reasoning. And so they based this thing on ownership of property. That is what it was, ownership of property. In this particular case, since cattle was the main component of property across a lot of the Sahel, Savannah regions and the plateau regions of Africa, it was easy to latch onto that as well.
Yes, I mean it's just incredible to think that that kind of arbitrary process of renaming, took place not just in the Caribbean, but in the 15th and 16th century, 17th century even, but also on the continent of Africa thereafter, closer to the present. And I noticed too that you mentioned, King Leopold and the atrocities that he committed, one of the worst genocidal figures of the 20th century. I just wanted to share with our readers that King Leopold's monument in Kinshasa stayed there. A monument venerating him remained in Kinshasa up until the Black Lives Matter movement in in 2020, when it became controversial. And it took quite a while and a struggle to eventually have it removed. So these are all very, very interesting connections to between Africa and the rest of the world. Very interesting
Indeed,
document.
indeed. Let's bring in Renee for some brief comments on this.
Right. So,
Renee, of course, is familiar with the Hamites and the Hamitic theory
yes.
from university, of course. Yes.
Yes. Before I give my very brief comments, I do want to acknowledge that 91.1 FM is with us. So Mr. Ruskin is in the studio tonight. I think he might have fell out briefly, but he is here with us, um, carrying the radio program. With respect to the Africa report tonight. So I do think that the historical context is necessary to understand why, the involvement of Rwanda in what people are calling the Congo crisis, and the role that the Rwandan leader is playing now. And yeah, like you said, I am familiar with the those those theories of why black people were supposedly inferior, and what were like religious um, reasoning, and then the ridiculous scientific reasonings that they also put forward. So I am looking forward to the next Africa report, where um, you deal with the present crisis and shed more light on what's going on. Yeah.
Indeed, indeed. More of the international players would be addressed in the next edition, part two. And I just want to say welcome, Ruskin. I did mention you in the Africa report as one of our Indaba team, so you have not been left out at all. And greetings to the listeners on 91.1 FM. Yes, so we would move now on to the second segment of the program, and that is the interview of Abeo Jackson and what's the name of the
Keegan Taylor.
yes, Taylor.
From
And
the
that
Philadelphia
interview was
Collective.
conducted by Renee. So Renee should do us the honor of introducing the guests, who of course are attending another event, but nevertheless they're our guests in absentia and present through the interview. So tell us something why this interview was conducted, Renee, and tell us a little bit about your guests that you interviewed.
Okay, so we at ESCTT always try to remain relevant, and for us, Carnival has a particular significance here at the Emancipation Support Committee, because we understand the level of African influence in the different carnival aspects and activities that people enjoy to this day, whether it's quote unquote mainstream pop culture playing mass, or if it's something that's still on the fringes, like I wouldn't even say stick fighting, because I had noted that particularly this year, that the marketing around stick fighting really had leveled up, so to say, and they seem to have gotten a lot of corporate sponsorship, and it's good, because you want to have this particular tradition be celebrated and given the space and prominence it needs in the public eye. But as people would tune in and listen, the discussion also kind of reflects on when such a traditional art form or cultural practice becomes mainstream and becomes very popular and becomes the in thing, how does that impact the very traditions and ritual around it? And we at ESC always had a particular interest in stick fighting. We have we understand it to be one of those African martial arts forms that has been passed on through generations. Here is something that we try to expose our public and particularly our young children to, because we understand the value of it. It's not just waving a stick and trying to hit somebody. So we had the opportunity to speak with Keegan, who is a stick fighter himself. He's not in the competition in this year, but he is a well accomplished stick fighter in his own right. He's also an artist himself. Abeo Jackson, she is also a cultural activist. I believe now she's pursuing her PhD. I stand corrected if that's not the case, but I know she's pursuing higher level study around African culture, both its manifestations on the continent and here in the diaspora. And of course, she calls herself a Jamet. And what that means now, what it would have meant back then, and how we are reclaiming the name, and giving it, reclaiming the name, and so doing, reclaiming power. So it was a really sort of exciting discussion. I'm sorry didn't get to do something more. I'm hoping that the Indaba team will agree to have them on following the finals, because like I said, the finals are taking place tonight, and they are very much there, taking a teen, and just being part of the scene and the vibe tonight. I'm sorry that I could not attend. In part because I do have to do this, but also because it's quite down in San Fernando. I remember the year that I did get to actually go. I think it would have been a semifinals. It was in Arima, and all the girls or young women at the office, we met up after work and we went and we really had a good time. So I'm just really excited to share the interview with everyone. But before we do that, I also, like I said, Keegan is a performing artist and he did a song this year. And it's a really nice song. So you'll get the song and then we'll go straight into the interview.
Okay, good.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah. That's all.
Welcome, the truth. Everything come out of your home. The truth. I living alone in the jungle. I living alone in the jungle. Snake and lion, hearts are humble. I living alone. I living alone in the jungle. I living alone in the jungle. Snake and lion, hearts are humble. I don't want them already. They can't stop my destiny. But if you stand in front of me, oh boy, oh my lad, I see you coming with wanga to put me under pressure. But I come in like a soldier, running like thunder. Remember me soldier. Come out to play in the morning, Juve. And you see how we sink and dirty. Bet your life when we come down ready. No afraid of no man, if you lost your finger. If you lost your eye, if you bruise your elbow, if we teeth your eyes. When we come out to play in the morning, Juve. And you see how we sink and dirty. Bet your life when we come down ready. No afraid of no man, if you lost your finger. If you lost your eye, if you bruise your elbow, if we teeth your eyes. Don't say nobody never tell ya. Remember the time when Granny tried to tell ya. Well alright, leave me, let me tell ya. Cause I don't want nobody else come and tell ya. Juve is a time when human come out on the front like the fight of demon. Early in the morning we come down, see all the warriors stand up at the junction. I don't want them already. They can't stop my destiny. But if you stand in front of me, oh boy, oh my lad, I see you coming with wanga to put me I'm ready. No afraid of no man.
Hi, so we do apologize for the technical difficulties, but we'll go straight into the interview now with Keegan Taylor and Abeo Jackson. Okay, hi everybody. My name is Renee Francois. I work at the Emancipation Support Committee of Trinidad and Tobago, and as part of our Indaba program tonight, we have Keegan Taylor and Miss Abeo Jackson, who one of them is a stick fighter. Both of them are stick fighters, and the another one is a carnival connoisseur and a cultural activist. They both are cultural activists in their own right, and just have really sort of immersed themselves, not just in Carnival, but African culture here in Trinidad and Tobago and the wider Caribbean. So we're really happy to have them on tonight to discuss the tradition of stick fighting. Miss Abeo and Keegan, I hope I did you all justice with the introduction.
Okay. We are family at this point. We good.
Great. So I kind of wanted to start off with speaking to Keegan because in addition to the stick fighting cultural activism, you're also an artist. And I know that you do have a new song this year. We would have just played it for our audience. Do you want to tell me more about your song, your inspiration? And what would have motivated you to bring out this particular item in 2025?
So the song, well, first of all, good evening to the audience. Thank you for having us. We appreciate the platform, especially on a interesting and important day like today where the stick fight finals is now tonight. The motivation behind this song is having coming off the heels of writing Bois for Marshall and Bungie. The song was made for the love of stick fighting that I had immersed myself in for a period of time before writing Bois, and a strong desire to want to kind of bridge the gap between mainstream soca and what was happening in the Gael, which will kind of be like the fringe or considered the fringe aspects of our culture. This was in 2016 or 17, 2017, the song was written. So just under 10 years ago, the kind of popularity that stick fight has now in terms of the mainstream was not like what it is now. So I felt as though back then, having cultural pieces that names like Marshall Montano and Bungie Garlin eventually got tied into would bring the kind of media and mainstream attention to the game because I cared about it and still do. At the time, I wanted to use my powers for good, so to speak. I'd come into the stick fighting as a soca artist, as a producer, as a martial artist. So you come into something and you meet the mentors and the people that I would have met. I always have this feeling like I want to give back, especially to those who give plenty to me. I didn't have plenty of money at the time. So what did I have? I had opportunities and platform to lift the people who I was around, like King David, who has been featured in the music video, and so many other people who we would have worked with. So that's how I kind of leveraged the opportunities that I had to lift those around me up, and by extension, the art form itself. So Do Cry was written, which is the song that you have heard. It's another song built off the music of the music of the Gaia, which is the love. And another attempt to, I think, a successful attempt to bridge the soca and lave genre in a tighter way. So that essentially is what bred the song, like a continuation of Lave's in the mainstream, Lave's in your ears, Lave's right next door, Lave's playing on the radio station right next to a popular Marshall or this or that or the other. So that is the essential point of the song, but also to sensitize and celebrate. I want to say celebrate celebrate is a strong word, because the music nice when you reach down in the Gael and you hear it.
It's a vibe.
Yeah. So
Yes.
if you in that and you just write music, you would want to make it. It is an inspiration too, you know. It's, when you're an artist, you're inspired. You make art based on your inspiration. So I was inspired and continue to be inspired by the music of the Gael to make songs right now.
So, Abeo, I saw some of the antics. I think it was from semifinals where you were doing some of the hosting and the commentary. How do you think? I personally find that the public over the last few years has been showing this like renewed interest in stick fighting and it being a mainstay event that people want to attend. Has been growing. What has been your experience so far? What has been, have you seen the crowds growing at these particular competitions?
No, I didn't get to do commentary for stick fight. I would have done commentary for Pan. I would love the opportunity to do commentary for stick fight. You would happily call me.
Hint.
I tried my hat in the ring. First off, as well, if you see me dip in and out of the frame, or you hear an extra voice in the background, there are actually 3 of us that now attend to everything that we do. So
no problem.
I'm just giving you all the context. If you see me dip in and out, yes. What I would say in terms of having been immersed in a real way in Kalinda through Keegan's energy, through his experience, as well as working with the Kambole 1881. My first introduction and iteration of being immersed in Kalinda is through performance. And I need us to make a very, very clear differentiation between Kalinda as performance and then Kalinda as in terms of actually playing / fighting stick. There are these are two very, very separate things. Do I consider myself a stick fighter in its realest sense? I haven't fully entered a Gael yet. I have not been bled. I've not been cut. You know, that ritual element inside of it. I mean, I might have been in terms of training with Keegan, because, you know, not only is he my partner, he's also my mentor, my teacher within the space. I might have gotten a little cut there in terms of its training, but in terms of that iteration of fighting stick in the Gaels as we know it around Trinidad and Tobago, I haven't had that privilege yet. But what I'm very, very interested and inspired to see is how many. What happened there?
Sorry.
Are we still on?
Yeah, we're still on.
Yeah, you guys are fine.
Go ahead,
sorry,
Abeo.
I just can't see you right now. It's the fact that the audiences do seem to be growing, not just the in-person audiences, from what I'm noticing in spaces when the competitions are happening, but in terms of the national attention to stick fight. It is everywhere this year in particular. It is everywhere. And I think it's because of the fact that there's a lot of intervention happening in these spaces where workshops are going on for children, for women. When we were dealing with Mental Health Week for men, how do we find ways to use Kalinda as an intervention in spaces for reparation, for healing, for conflict resolution? These kinds of things have been happening in the space all through the year. So now that it is actually, as we would want to say, calendar season, there is new interest because of the continuous ecosystem that has been building throughout the year. And it's not just our spaces that have been doing it in terms of Calendar Collective, which is Keegan, or Kambole 1881. There are other people, there are other parties that have been doing interventions in this space. And I think that is what we need to underline. If we want to see it really grow and blow up and blossom during the Carnival, we have to make sure that what we are doing during the year in terms of how do we use Kalinda in our communities, how do we use Kalinda to reinvigorate that sense of ritual and tradition and spirituality, because we have to underline the very spiritual element inside of it. If we continue to do that during the year, then during the carnival is just, you know, extra sauce, extra gravy. Carnival is the performance of it, as opposed to the ritual and tradition of it that should be all the time and all year round.
So you're speaking about the ritual and tradition. I know that a lot of the traditional carnival masking traditions, there's a very strong spiritual aspect to it. Either Keegan or Abeo, can you all speak on the spiritual practices or preparation that stick fighters have to undergo before they enter the ring? What you're allowed to tell us, because I know certain aspects of it is also a bit secretive. So what you can
the institution itself is a ritual by in itself. There's so much about calendar that needs to come together to create the whole of what the ritual is. So like I can give you old examples that don't happen anymore. You have a thing called the blood hole. So the blood is an interesting place. It's a hole dug near the Gael where men, when they bleed, they go and drain the blood. Everybody drains their blood there. What's the purpose of that? We'll leave that on the side for now. Then you have the fact that these Gaels were traditionally held at four corner junctions. Another key understanding of ritual portal, ancestral portal. I could tell you it from, I'm a filmmaker as well, so I always see things in a kind of TV like way. But anytime a Gael going on, imagine that there's an invisible group of attendees, you know what I mean, who come to see it too. And you have to pay attention to them. And they come to it, there's vibes it, they have their own things going on. And the living, breathing participants, be it drummers, stick fighters, they kind of doing it for them too now. And a lot of what's happening in the Gaia space is impacted by unseen energies, forces, and presence. So much of the ritual that happens around this space is to pay obeisance to and to manage some of those energies and forces, right? So the pouring of alcohol in the ring at certain intervals, certain words and prayers are said by the ringmaster when the space is being opened. Certain things. Do you walk clockwise or anti-clockwise when you're preparing the ring? All those things. So you imagine the guy as a space and it has to be prepared, right? You would not have a wedding in a hall and not pull up certain things and mop and you know what I mean. So if you're going on a whole Gael, you have to prepare the grounds, prepare the space. You'll hear words like I will say our prayers and certain men other prayers. They will say in the ring before it start. They put in a camphor. The use of alcohol, white rum in particular, a man will use punching and not white oak. Why? All of these things. These things happen. So that's the space itself. The drums themselves are also a key element of ritualistic energy in the space. The drums are, like, from how I know it and learn it, the drums is king. The drums guide everything, and dare I say, in our African tradition. So it's also similar here. I've also experienced things like capoeira and all of these other fighting arts, and the drums and the batteria or the group of musicians are revered as the people who open the way and who you take lead from in terms of what happens next. So as we move out to the Gael, we go to the preparation, which is the fighters. The fighters have to prepare themselves. Every fighter has his own unique ritual, but it's one like if it's all fighters ritual, you'll hear the common nuance, but every fighter has his own thing that he probably learned from your uncle or your grandfather or your father with 2-3 little differences. But particularly fighters prepare their sticks because your stick is your ancient weapon and it had to be prepared. Of course, obviously people know these stories coming out of prepared sticks. You hear about mount stick. You hear about all them things, which essentially means you stick a wobia and all that.
Yes.
I mean, I've seen things. Let's just put it that way. I've seen and heard things. So there's that. We get into that now or later or never, but it's real. It's there. There's that folklore, if you want to call it. There is preparation of the stick, from the cutting of the stick to when you get it, and then you prepare your stick for battle, and then there's the human vessel, which is yourself. So you have to prepare that. So you have your spiritual bath. Your bath is essentially a bush bath, but it have other things that prepare your bath, prepare you before you go and fight. And yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say the list goes on and on, but it's a fairly complex preparation. So for me, I would play stick in general. Like I'll just get up in the morning and play stick with anybody. But if I go into the Gael, I would take a few months of preparation before I go into a Gael space. I had to make up my mind. And
that just is something you're going and do this year.
like I would just go into a normal Gael right now. Like tonight, we go down there, I would hope. So as I do things not to go in the Gael, you know, like I probably wouldn't walk with my stick, you know, like you'll do things because you know you're not fully prepared. So you'll try to, because when the drum knock on you, you have a certain vibes around you, you will end up. But if you know better, you'll know I shouldn't go unprepared, because if a man, you might be better than a man skillfully, but a man might prepare other things and you didn't prepare the other thing, and that is where you can get it. So what's that and other things, you know? So it is a situation where stick fight has the power to teach you of multi-layered preparation. You know, you get up in the morning and you're going to work. You can go straight to work, but you know, you cover yourself, you cover your family, you cover your car. You know, like I was on a devout Christian, if you want to say it, and you know, I had fallen off that Christian way for various reasons. But during my stick fight come up, I got a different appreciation for psalms and certain things, because they were less of things that you hear in the church and more of actual tools to be used in very specific ways. Because some of the older men will show you how to use certain psalms and when to use it, and you would see certain things happen with these things. So I mean, stick fight gave me has given me a very practical approach towards the power of what we know as prayer and what we know as ritual. And so yeah.
I think so. Sorry, I think
no, you go ahead.
To underline a couple of things that he said. That thing about being taught by an uncle, a father, older brother. There is a serious generational element to these traditions, and it's why it's tradition. It's why ritual becomes tradition. A ritual is a ritual, but eventually there are certain things that have to happen within a space for a ritual to then become a tradition that is handed down. And I think that is important in terms of the familial link, the community link, which is why I say certain things need to continue to happen as an ecosystem during the year, all the time, in order for it to flourish the way we want it to flourish, as well as in terms of understanding. One of my mentors always say, you don't perform ritual. So what people are treated to in terms of what we see on the television, or you go to the Gael and you see, depending on how much people reveal, there's a performance, there will always be a performance element to it, which I think is very, very important to note, versus the ritualistic element. And those ritualistic elements are rooted in Africanist tradition. They are rooted in Africanist ritual. You cannot, there's no way to sugarcoat that. We can argue about from whence it came. There are some people who would like to lean into the erasure of some of our Yoruba Ifa traditions being intersplunked inside of it. But according to one of my mentors, Dr. Suzanne Burke, when you're talking about cultural studies, nothing inside of a plural space as such as ours, because we are a plural society, operates as a hegemony, like just this one thing. Everything comes together and rub up against each other, right?
This cross-cultural influence.
Cross-cultural influences, right? And sometimes cross-cultural influences happen even within spaces that phenotypically look like each other. So when we would have all come here, we all were different nations.
Yes.
So there were traditions and rituals of the different nations that would have come into the space and rub against each other. So yes, there are some people who talk about Central Bantu region, sure. But when it came here, the point is there were certain things operating inside of this space. So it's why the Orisha yard, the Jamet yard, the Pan yard is all the same yard.
Yeah.
It's all the same yard. And out of that yard those yards came the Jamet Carnival. And inside of the Jamet Carnival was the Bois man. As one of those leading the charge as almost the man on the front line, the energy on the front line of ensuring that our carnival continued, the ensuring that we have the right to continue with our carnival and celebrate ourselves, walk in our own power, celebrate our own beauties, live our own experiences in a way that is uniquely ours. That's what in essence would have happened. So a lot of the rituals that Keegan would talk about are things that you would find in various religious iterations, spiritual iterations, the pouring of the rum, the camphor, there's a reason why certain energies inside of certain traditions are known to be present or are said to be present. There's a reason why, say, Pan is of Ogun, but Ogun is also of Stick. You understand? It's that warrior energy, etc.
The energy.
Those who, even within the Stick community, and rightfully so, because again, plural society, a society that is still suffering the after effects, the continued effects of coloniality. And inside of that is also, where does Christianity fit in the midst of that? So there are a lot of people who are comfortable talking about what Africanist tradition and ritual and spirituality really means inside of a space like Kalinda, because it is at such, it is directly knocking against what people have become comfortable with and feel safe with regards to Christianity. And those are uncomfortable conversations that we don't want to have. You understand? Idea of Stick being a blood ritual does not sit right with certain people.
With a lot of people. Yeah.
However, Africanist tradition says something else. So, those are things, which is why I say, if it is, we are to frame it as being heavily about performance, heavily about intervention in our communities, heavily about reparation in our spaces and conflict resolution, then it becomes easier. And I'm not saying to gentrify it or put some plaster of respectability on it. I'm not saying that at all. But what I'm saying is it becomes easier. So sometimes our own people to be able to receive this thing that actually is for all our benefit, particularly our children, for them to receive it in a way that doesn't terrify them, because in a lot of ways we are still terrified of ourselves.
So I think that point is important, because I this particular year I've been reflecting on the marketing around the stick fighting, because I haven't seen that ever, and it made me reflect on, okay, when this becomes mainstream, it becomes popular, it becomes the thing to do now. What happens to those traditional ritualistic aspects of it? What would that compromise look like? But I do want to ask, based on what you might know of the competitors, are a lot of them engaging in that ritualistic preparation, or is it for them something that they're not focusing heavily on?
It depends on where you're from, right? And because the fighters traditionally come from a lot of rooted and rural places, I personally don't think that is ended, because any stick man who know anything good about stick know it ain't coming halfway. You know what I mean? Like, before you even learn a skill, your first line of defense is not your stick. You understand what I'm saying? So nobody don't want to come halfway. So I feel like, especially traditional players, and traditional meaning, I mean like people from certain areas and places. Like, I make that comparison because I will say a man from like some of the contemporary people I interact with or I am training, they would go in a stick fight ring without the knowledge, unless I show them, or people from our community. They will go and fight just so. But people from the communities and who know different things will not go and fight just so. So if we're talking about, that's why right now when we teach stick fight, I would say on a level 1 type of scenario. You are exposed to stick fight and given basic skills, but you can't learn it yet. You know what I'm saying? There's a lot that I personally have not taught anyone. A lot of things that I haven't even shown Abeo or anybody because we ain't reached there yet. But that don't mean it's not there. So I say all that to say that I wouldn't be able to tell you what every stick fighter out there is doing, but and general practice of a stick fight. If you just play basketball, you will shoot solo shots at the ring in the evening by yourself. You will buy a pair of sneakers. There are things you will do as a basketball player. So in stick fight, there are things that you will do as well. But within all of this conversation, I would say that I am reminded that, that's why we have levels to this thing, because on your first day, you're not going to learn how to bathe. We literally reached there. I've never reached there with any students, so to speak. We haven't reached there yet. Everything has been on a more exposition type of, like I'm exposing you to the art, I'm immersing you in the art. And as the facilitator of this space, I manage that space with the people that I teach and show. But when we get to that place of preparing people for the Gael and thing, then the learnings and what we show would start to change.
Just to tap on to what you were saying, and I find it's really interesting because these are also things I've been thinking about. You're talking about now that we are, and that's always the danger. It's the reason why gatekeeping is a double-edged sword. Gatekeeping, you hold on to it so much that now we have to do so much work to make inroads in our communities, to let people know that this is ours, it belongs to us, and this is why it's important and it exists, and this is how you do it. And when I say this is how you do it, in terms of as he said, at level 1 basic, this is how you dance it, this is how it could be used in this particular context, etc. Fine. But then there's the other level of where we don't gatekeep at all, and then you open the gates fully, and then you have a case where, like for instance, the conversation about what happened in Pan semi-finals, where the overrun of corporates in a space so much that the ground, and it's so interesting that this year one of the biggest songs talks about the ground, and the ground being the originators and needing to continue to carry it. How do we make room for the ground to continue to carry it, right? So history would have shown that corporate was invited into the carnival space by those who purposefully wanted to gentrify and sanitize it, right? Invited into the carnival space through competition, through the competitions, through the sponsorship, etc., etc. Now, do we need sponsorship? Yes. Is it a form of reparation? Yes, because a lot of the corporate spaces, a lot of the corporate entities operate in actual spaces of privilege that do owe a social, they have a social contract that they should uphold in terms of giving back to the communities off of whom's backs they are making buku dollars. So yes, there's that. But then at the same time, how do we ensure that, so we've opened the gates, how do we still hold on to this thing and ensure that it isn't taken from us? It isn't taken from us, that it isn't now used to actively make money for the same corporate, and then the actual stick fighter and the guys on the ground have nothing to get.
They're not benefiting from it at all. Yeah,
they're not benefiting from it at all. So it's always a very, very fine line we must walk where that is concerned, because we don't want to be having the same conversation that we saw the president of Pan Trinbago having to navigate that all through Pan semis in terms of what would have happened, corporate buyout or stands, the scalpers selling tickets for $1,200, etc., etc. We don't want that we have, and then of course we know what has happened to Mass, where Spain is a ghost town because of the juggernaut that has become the all-inclusive band. What does that mean? What has that done for the communities, particularly of East Port of Spain, who are now outsiders in a lot of ways on Monday and Tuesday? Mass has moved to the West. So we want to make sure that we don't see the same thing happening with Stick. And the only way that can happen is if the Stick community opens itself to the people for whom it actually belongs, who don't know. We're not talking about, for instance, the American linkages to Stick. Where is the Stick archive? Where is he? Where you want to read about the great Stick men of York?
Yeah.
Where can we go and sit? I mean, Keegan has been fortunate to sit at the feet of elders. The average little boy, little girl in a secondary school somewhere who needs that kind of intervention in their lives, how do they access that? Where is it?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There are some people who would like you to believe that certain people have more right to pick up a bois than others. You understand? And what we see is, if it is you is of melanated skin and you live in Trinidad and Tobago and calendar calls to you, then you have all right to answer that call. You understand? There are many people walking around who are of American heritage who don't know that they are of American heritage, but there is such a huge connection between the American and the calendar tradition that is something. There's a gap in the research in terms of what does that mean? What does that look like?
What does that look like?
You understand? So there are big gaps in the space and the research, and all we're trying to do while we do our work is gently try to fill little holes. We can't fill all. It would be presumptuous of us to think and arrogant of us to think that we could fill all. But just to do your work honestly and earnestly and hope that others are inspired to do the same.
So I just want to bring it back to later tonight, because we're coming up on our time for this particular segment. But I hope to have you all on soon again, because we would definitely like to have a discussion about what that finals look like. But can you just tell me how many finalists people can look forward to seeing participating? Are they, because I'm sensing that a lot of them are from Moruga. I can be wrong, but I'm sensing that a lot of the groups are predominantly
a popular name when it comes to Stick. I won't be able to answer many of the questions that me personally, because but generally speaking, I can give you an idea of what the structure generally is like. So in the finals, you have, from the preliminaries, you have teams that vying for the opportunity to be the winning guile of the season. And then you have the Rock, which is the King Stick Fighter. So it's two competitions in one.
Okay.
Generally, so the competition, the guile part is a three-person team, right? We'll have more, but it's 3 bouts. So they have a round robin till, let me say, I think it's probably 6 guiles or 8 guiles. I'm not sure how much tonight, but you have generally a fairly even number, and they play down to the first, second, and third guile, right? Some of the more known guiles are Moruga, Talparo, Grand Couva, Bish, I mentioned Maya already, and a couple others. Shogona Saba Gael, I think, and Couva. But Grand Couva is right. So again, I haven't seen the listing. I'm going down tonight to really re-immerse myself into the competitive aspect of it and really see, because tonight, alongside Lost Tribe, who we would have worked with to put on an event that was Stick themed, as well as Kambule 1881 and Visa and my organization, Calendar Collective, we are contributing $10,000 via the NCC to what we call the most consistent stick fighter. He hopefully in future, he or she, but right now is he.
It could be a she.
He who would have been, had placed, solid points coming through the competition, and shows a wide range of skill set and promise based on the judges' tally as well. So we and this is a dream come true for not just myself, my organization, and our team, but I mirror off of one of my mentors, King Kali, who shut down the stick in 2013, 2012, 13 there, where he said, stick fighters are not being properly compensated. So
I vaguely remember that making the news back then. Yeah. Yes.
so I think for me that is a kind of like a full circle that we could offer more to the stick fighters. And to be honest with you, stick fighters really and truly, we are the wild cards of the community. Like I was listening to Abeo talk about the placement of the stick fighter and the panyard and the community and whatever. And, you can't get a stick fighter on your side and believe they're going to ride with you because you say, let me ride. Them just deal with them just deal with the energy, the vibe, and what's going on right now. You need that in the community because you can't be bought or sold. However, you need to take care of yourself and your family by not just the sweat of your brow, but by the stroke of your hand is also there. So I want to know that my skill that I developed and I could real fight could pay off for something now. So, the figure of $10,000 is a substantial one that I think anybody, even though it's TT dollars, 10,000
that's something. That's plenty.
So a lot, and just for playing stick, we hope that it could go up. But with sending the money up, we also want to send the what's the word I'm looking for? Send the responsibility of the stick fighter in the ring up as well. We want to see an increase in sportsmanship. We want to see an increase in skill. We want to see how you're dressed and all these things. And we're working with the NCC. I'd also like to say special thanks to Mr. Gypsy Peters and Mr. Clarence Moore. These gentlemen have been very facilitating. I know that some people think NCC could be, whatever, but in working with them, I'm very encouraged by the openness that they have expressed in terms of carrying this tradition on with the limited resources at sometimes, and they've carried it. The ground carry it, so NCC carry it as much as they could as an organization. But the real carriers are the artists themselves. The fighters, people who really love it within the community. We love it. We are lovers of that particular aspect of the culture. Even though we entrench in all different parts, the jab, the moko, we know the whip jab, everybody, we know all of them. And when we come together as a community of traditional mass characters or players or whatever have you, we each have our own. This is a jamet here, but a jamet that manifests as a baby doll, a baby doll that manifests as it's weird. But I think that's the beauty of the masking tradition that you were talking about, that we get to become who we want to be. And maybe, as we say, just a period of time, which is Carnival, but in truth, if we could bleed that out of just Carnival, because stick wasn't always played for Carnival alone. Stick used to play Easter time, August 1st, Emancipation. You know what I mean? A man might play filter player stick around Christmas, anytime they can play stick, you know what I'm saying? But we end up playing stick around Carnival and time. But some of the traditional, some of the communities doing what I want now, like just when you start to play stick, you just love it, and people have to see it. So I'm all for seeing stick throughout the year. I feel that happen. I feel we're on the verge of that.
Okay.
And just finally, I think I've started to see it happen, and this leans into what I was talking about, archiving and making sure that we get the history. Many of his mentors have transitioned, right? And we have some stick fighters of brilliant repute that are still amongst us. And I would urge every media house, every archiver, every historian with their salt to go and seek out these men and women and get their stories. Get it from them. Don't wait for somebody else to tell their stories. Let's get their stories from them in terms of making sure that the generations to come have some sort of context when they enter these spaces, because context is everything. Otherwise, people will try to tell you about yourself.
Yeah.
And write out of your own story.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Right. So thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Keegan and Abeo. I think it was a wonderful discussion. I know that I certainly have learned quite a few things, some things that I have, was upset I didn't have a pen to jot down, but thank God this is recorded so I can go back and play it over. I want to personally wish all the stick fighters the best for later tonight. I don't know if there's a crowd favorite going in, but because we have a relationship here with Red Drum Journal Group, I want to wish them the best. And just thank you for joining us. Sorry?
I'm encouraging everybody to go follow Red Drum Drumming on social media, particularly Facebook.
Yes. So I want to thank you all for coming and sharing so much information with us. I hope to have you all on after the Carnival period, after you all have rested, of course. And thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us. Enjoy and blessings.
Thank you.
Bye.
Yes, Renee, that was a great interview. I want to compliment you for that. I thought there were some great questions, and definitely you brought out some very significant information. You teased out, I think, things from your interviewees that generally might have been passed over by another interviewer. I thought particularly about your question on African spirituality, what I see as accessing the forces of African spirits for self-protection as well as for victory in the stick fight. So that preparation before performance, and of course, the near mythology around mounting of sticks. I thought also a very important tease out was the stick fighting as ritual versus the ritual for stick fighters and stick fighting. So one is the stick fight itself as a ritual, and then the rituals that must be done for stick fighting and for the protection of the stick fighters. What I might have wanted to know a little bit more about, of course, there's a lot more, but I know we are stretched for time, so I would just mention one more concern that I would have liked to hear elaborated on, or at least addressed, and that is the stick fighting and stick fighters beyond the carnival, in terms of purpose and practice, right? What happens after the carnival? And I'm talking about more the months after carnival rather than the months just before carnival when perhaps they're back, practicing and doing whatever. So the months after carnival, what is the status of stick fighting? Where is the stick fighting as art and so on, and even exercise, perhaps. But where is stick fighting in the months after carnival? I would have liked to hear something on that as well. Yes, so I will hand over to Brother Shabaka. I'm sure you have a lot to say.
Well,
you look like a stick fighter, You would have made. You have a good head. You have a good head to attract stick fighters.
Well, I was lucky enough to be involved in African martial arts, for a long time. Capoeira being the first choice, but over the years studying capoeira, we would have met with people from across the world who would have been familiar with the art forms coming from the continent itself, and would have been able to demonstrate the relationship between these African art forms. And you could see it, in terms of music, in terms of movement, etc. One of the things that always brings me to is it raises the second question, the question of stick fighters not being properly compensated. So capoeiristas, which is, as we just discussed, a related African martial art, are now very well compensated. You have capoeiristas who are millionaires who live and work all over the world. After they get to the contramestre level or the mestre level, they're able to open schools and to teach in their schools. If they're good and good at business as well, you find their schools could be, could have several hundred students in one part of the world, but then have students all over the world, and they become very comfortable in their old age. So capoeira pays. It pays to become a good capoeirista. But this didn't happen by accident. At the beginning of the 20th century, the first couple decades, capoeira was something considered to be just like stick fighting, something preserve of the kind of the vagabonds, the marginalized, those on the fringes of society, until one or two important innovators began to look at it critically and to develop ways to bring it into the mainstream, and to put it in some kind of institutional structure, and then to advance the art form from there. So it went from being something on the fringes of Brazilian society to becoming a Brazilian national sport, to becoming something by which capoeiristas could live well. And of course, many years ago, I noticed this, and not just with stick fighting, but with drummers as well. We have some of the best drummers in the world in Trinidad and Tobago. We've had over the years people we refer to as master drummers who can do anything, all kinds of extraordinary things with drums, and they develop their own unique set of rhythms here in Trinidad and Tobago. And yet, we haven't found a way, we in the African community, to make drumming in general a profitable enterprise. And I want to put the blame here squarely on those who are the leaders of our community, who have not gone and taken proper note of these disciplines, and taken a note, done the research on disciplines like capoeira to see how they went from marginal, like drumming and stick fighting in Trinidad, to becoming national sports, important parts of the countries in which they operate today. Brazil specifically in the first place, but then of course capoeira has become a universal and internationally loved discipline. So how do we move from where they are to where we are is something that you can go and study and understand. And it's something that I have, over a decade now, suggested to some of the elders that they implement, they begin to not just to implement, but first to analyze and understand how it could be done, and then to see in what ways they could implement those strategies here in Trinidad with drumming and with stick fighting. So there is a way, right? There is a path from where drumming and stick fighting is today to where it can be, following the capoeira route to where it can be potentially be in the future. So I want to make that clear. I wouldn't go into the details now, but let me just say that we studied that route some years ago, and I tried to present that to a number of elders, those ideas, encouraging them to. I've spoken to some of the drummers. I haven't spoken to the stick fighters about the possibilities yet, but there are some routes that could be taken consciously to transform those disciplines in that regard. I also want to just comment on and I hope Renee's going to rejoin us, but I heard Abeo Jackson use the term coloniality. And of course, this is a very new term in academia. I remember the first time I heard it and I thought to myself, I wonder if this person knows what they're talking about some years ago. But it tends to refer to that situation after the colonial powers have been either left or removed from a particular space. And you have some degree of autonomy or independence, but you're left with a number of legacies of colonialism. And so you have to, and all those legacies in thinking, in knowledge, in dress, in eating, in culture, in value systems, everything is coloniality. And so, it's very interesting to hear her use that term and then to refer to, the place of non-Christian religion or African traditional religion in the stick fighting realm, because a lot of the scholars in decoloniality, people like Ramon Gross-Fuguel, Walter Mignolo, Enrique Dussel, and others have tried to take this new academic, believe that they want to delink entirely from the European systems, institutions, and ways of thinking, and to return to some extent to the traditional forms of worship and so on that indigenous and African people would have had before the colonial experience, consciously return as part of the decolonial process or the decoloniality process. So it's very interesting to hear her use that term and to speak in those terms. So very, very interesting interview, Renee. Lots to unpack. And where's our sister?
Yes, I think we are past the top of the hour, and I'm sure Zakia will be very concerned about closing the show. And I think we should do that just at this point. Southern Africa has a lot of stick fighting cultures and communities there. I think that's something we can look at as well. And there's activism to take some of those stick fights into the Olympics. Also, Capera, I'm sure you're well aware of that. I don't see any reason why our stick fighting can't be developed to that extent. Of course, they may require, and I think they must require, some change of rules and so on. But I see no reason why such an art, which could be a kind of a sport as well, cannot be developed to that extent. So those are some things we can think about. And of course, Renee has indicated that she may bring Abeo back after the carnival. So we can address those things again,
Indeed.
And perhaps also talk about the Calypso in Africa, the extent to which the carnival bands, have been able to bring Africa into the carnival, especially from George Bailey's time, onward. And Calypsonians have been doing that since the 19th century.
Yeah.
So I would just end by wishing everyone listening to us, and others who are not listening to us, a safe and enjoyable carnival.
Indeed. Good place to close
See you
off.
at the next edition. Thank you for being with us this evening.